Okay, hi everybody. My name is Paul Cunnington. While I'm fiddling with my computer here, my volumes. I did a presentation a few days ago in the community, but unfortunately, we forgot to record it. So I wanted to do this special recording so it can be logged in the community, and I hope that you'll enjoy it. So just bear with me a second while I share my screen on my Zoom and bring up the slides. Okay. Sorry, one of my friends once said that when I did that thing with you just saw the curtains go, and they really liked it. So every time I do the first one with the curtains. It's me playing with technology. If I can actually do something with it, I'm impressed myself. So I'm a certified mindset coach, and I'm going to talk to you today about understanding your infinite potential. Now, my journey of understanding about my infinite potential and how we all have it began with this guy, Bob Proctor. And he's a guy I knew a long time in my career, but for some reason I never really put the dots together until I was in my early 50s, and I'm now 60, so it's not been that long ago. Anyway, just going back from my story, I was born in 1962. This is a picture of, if you don't know what it's called, it's a Morris Minor. In those days, I always used to smile to myself because of, cars and that. Nowadays, this car had a little arm that used to pop out from the side to let you know when you were turning left or right. So just to show you that I am, not quite a dinosaur, but I'm quite a long time ago. Anyway, when I was born, what I also didn't realize was, as I got to about 6, that I had been loaded with what I like to call manufacturer's settings, default settings, a little bit like a computer. So like DNA and other pieces of programming had already been built into me. And this is pretty much for everybody. So if you think about like the language that we speak, and you could have someone who is, say, born in China, and they may not be originally from China, but they'll end up, of course, speaking perfect Chinese because that's what they grew up with. That was part of their programming. And the same with myself in England. I end up speaking a type of English, and because that's what I grew up with. And when I come to like knife and fork, being a Brit, I do the fork the odd way, so it looks like it's really hard to balance my food instead of like scooping it the more sensible way. But that's what my programming was. That's how I do things. How you walk, how you fold your hand, even folded your hands, and then realized how you like normally do it, and then try to do it the other way around. And you just do these things without thinking. So we are all very much programmed as we are during our childhood. And we do this without thinking, with ease. And that's a very important thing, that we do this with ease, because it means that we can do anything with ease. We learn these things habitually. And in fact, one of the things I learned from Bob was that 97% of everything we do is through habit. It's habitual. So we do it kind of without thinking. We don't think about an awful lot of things. We just, it's like driving. I'm sure you might have driven somewhere and you get there and you think, how did I just get here? Maybe it's somewhere you've been many, many times before and you don't even remember getting there. So scarily enough, it's true that 97% of what we do, we're doing without thinking. That took me a little while to take in. By the way, the reason why I've written Google next to the little baby, I mean, that's not me. He's far cuter than I was. But it's just, you know, that when I was little, and of course, in those days, you know, when someone said Google, we thought it was a noise that a baby made. You know, it was like, there was no such thing as that then. So again, we had different programming at that time. Things like Google haven't even been imagined yet. And this is me before and after. And this is me during most of my career. I was about 10 years before my career sort of ended. I was probably in my 40s at that time. And I was working in an industry where I was serving people who were building their own businesses. And I was there as a support person from the company. And I really loved doing this because these people, you know, were building businesses that they'd never done before. They were doing regular jobs and they were doing these things as well. And I really enjoyed it. And the thing is that I was lucky because I was actually in harmony with what I was doing. But I hadn't got to that harmony by any deliberate intention on my part. I had got it a little bit like a sailing ship being blown by the wind, but my sailing ship had no rudder. I was just going with the flow. I was going with my own programming. I was not aware or deliberate in any way in what I was doing. I just happened to have come across this great job that happens to fit with my value system, my nature, and I was in harmony. So I was lucky. And most of my career, that's what it was like until I got to my 50s. And then all of a sudden, my career just went plop. I lost it. And my job sort of didn't really exist anymore. And my career had come to a halt. And I was left with this feeling of, you know, as far as I was concerned, I am my job. That's how I used to judge myself. And so if I didn't have my career, well, then I didn't exist anymore. I mean, how can I measure what sort of person I am unless I've got a career? So I then went down a very, very, very dark rabbit hole. And some of my programming from my childhood that had been pretty much arrested, not completely stopped. Now and again, it would come out, but some of that programming that didn't serve me because I'd suffered some trauma and some other things as a child. And as you know, many of us have all sorts of things that happen to us. A lot more people than perhaps you would imagine at first. And these experiences caused me to have aggression and anger issues. And the more I lost my confidence and with the loss of my career, these issues came more and more to the forefront. And so I would be acting in ways that I didn't want to act. And I didn't even know why I was doing it, but I was doing these things. And sometimes when I was doing them, I couldn't even remember afterwards what I'd done. So it was just an automated response. And inside of myself, and it is very much your inner self, I kept battling with this programming and I wanted to figure out what on earth was going on with me. And I started to realize as I look back how these things had come out in a lesser degree and why it was happening during the rest of my life. Why had it now got worse and what was going on with me? Why was I doing things that I didn't want to do and I didn't want to be? So I started to explore and started to look for a solution. And Bob was the solution for me with a program called Thinking into Results. And one of the first things I learned about is that we are all spiritual beings. We're all spirits. And if you were a scientist, you would say we're all energy. And you'll find with the spiritual world and the scientific world, they're coming more and more. You know, it's almost like a different glossary of definitions, but the information is exactly the same. So we're all energy, okay? And that energy, we're all connected. And we are living in an ocean of motion. So if you think also about emotion, well, that is energy in motion. Now, when Bob first told me this, it took me a little while to, you know, I thought, hey, Bob seems like a really nice guy, but this we're all spirits and energy thing, I think he's been smoking something, you know, it's a bit far-fetched for me. But anyway, with the help of my wife, I kept working on the program, and he went on to tell us about how we're all creators. So when people talk about, oh, I'm creative and I'm not creative, we are all creators. We are all here to create. That's exactly the purpose of our lives, everybody. And we also have an inner self. And our inner self is goal-seeking. We're actually goal-seeking animals, if you like, or beings is probably a better word. And we're always seeking a purpose. It's what we're meant to do all the time. And when we cannot find our purpose in life, that's when we feel stuck. And he also went on to tell me about these things called internal faculties. So he started to talk about, you know, hear, see, smell, taste, touch. That is like the outside world, and that's like can clog up your mind with information that's not actually correct because it's coming from the outside, and that we can trust more the internal faculties from our inner self. Again, I wondered a lot about what Bob was saying. You know, when you hear these things, and if it's for the first time, it's an awful lot to take in. But the more you listen to it, the more, even if you don't understand it at first, you may find that you're sort of thinking, you know, I'm not sure about this yet, and I don't quite understand it all yet, but I really feel there's something in this. And if you ever feel that way, that is your intuitive self that's talking. It's your own intuition, which is saying, okay, just go with this, you're going in the right direction. Another thing Bob used to explain to me was, he said, have you ever thought about it that all other animals, except for us, you know, they've all got stripes, they've got sharp teeth, they're really fast, or they've got tails, or they can swing from tree, whatever it is, they've got all these special customized abilities, or camouflage, or what have you, for the, you know, where they live, to be able to fit into the circumstances that they live in, you know, wherever part of the world they live in, and they fit in perfectly. And yet, as you can see with Tom Hanks here in Castaway, if you ever saw the film Castaway, and you know, here he is, if you put us on our own in most parts of the world, we're either too cold, too hot, thirsty, or we can't catch any or find any food. You know, we don't have thick skin or fur and things to take care of us. So why is it that we physically aren't actually made to fit into any circumstances, or the circumstances where we're, you know, created, if you like? And that's because our minds are different from all other beings, because we have a mind that allows us to create our own circumstances, which is exactly what we've done. and all the things we've invented and imagined, just like, you know, if you think back in 1962 when I was born, and all the things that have been imagined now, you know, the knowledge to do those things was always there, but we had to become aware and to you know, aware enough before we were able to invent those things, imagine those things. And that's happening all the time. We make circumstances fit us. We also exist as energy, and we exist on frequencies. We operate on frequencies. So many of you may have heard about a book called The Secret. Now, The Secret, which Bob was featured in, talked about the law of attraction. Now, the law of attraction is in fact a secondary law to the law of vibration. And just to give you a thought here, have you ever gone into a restaurant or you know, seen a show or you know, anywhere, a shop, and you think to yourself, yeah, I really like the vibration in here. Yeah, it feels good, feels good. And you may have only just walked in the door and gone a few paces, but you either feel you like it or you think, this is not for me. I don't like the feel of this place. And if you really think about it for a moment, we do that all the time. And we think about the vibe, and it is literally a vibration that we pick up. And there is the physical vibration, there is an intellectual vibration, and a spiritual vibration. And what we are able to do is, with our imagination, whatever we can imagine, if we can focus that in our mind, because we do think in pictures, we can bring that from the spiritual world into the physical world. I know, I thought that sounded strange when I first heard it too. But if you think about it for a moment, think about the Wright brothers. They were the guys that invented the first flying machine. Now, I can't remember if it was 15 seconds or 15 minutes that they actually managed to get up and stay up, probably 15 seconds. But they did it. And their father, I believe, thought they were absolutely nuts. And he wanted them locked up into you know, an asylum. He thought they were completely crazy, and thought even worse when they actually managed to fly. So if there'd never been any flight before, where on earth did the Wright boys get the idea? How did they do it? They imagined it. They imagined it. And by imagining it and focusing on that picture in their mind, they manifested it from the spiritual world into reality. And that's how everything is invented, just like the internet, Apple, you know, everything you can possibly think of, Apple computers, I mean, by the way, everything you can possibly think of, we imagine it in our mind's eye, we get a picture of it, and we bring it from the spiritual world into the physical world. And as we do this more and more, we also touch at times an intellectual plane. So, you know, as we learn to manifest things, we intellectually have more belief, because we know we can bring something into the physical world because we've done it before with other things. But the spiritual plane is the most important thing. And the business people that I used to work with, you know, they were always talking about gratitude. And I was amazed at that, because, you know, I just thought these people were wonderful. They just had a wonderful energy. Didn't realize that's what it was then, but it was a lovely energy, a lovely vibration. And I thought, isn't it nice that they're always feeling grateful for what they have? But one of the important reasons why they promoted this so much is because when you're feeling grateful, you're putting yourself on that spiritual frequency. And we need to have ourselves on the frequency of the things that we wish to manifest, and that is on a spiritual frequency. And when we're on a physical frequency, that is programming that we have, that we've grown up with, which is basically looking at the physical world. It's looking at what are our present results. We're judging ourselves on our present results, and we're saying to ourselves, this is it. This is as good as it's going to get. I'm never going to be able to do any better than this until, unless I can physically see it, I don't believe it. And because you believe that, then nothing else comes through. If you think this is my place, this is all I'm ever going to get in my life, then that's exactly where you will stay, because our minds are that powerful. And if you give yourself that instruction, then that's exactly what your mind will do for you. But if you imagine and you believe that you can manifest the life you want, you can do that too. Another thing that Bob told me, which is very important, people used to talk to me about living in the now. And I always wondered, what does living in the now mean? I mean, I'm here now, so I'm living, so I must be living in the now. And it was one of these cool things that I used to hear all the time, a bit like gratitude, and I could never put the dots together. And I always like to talk about it from that point of view, because I get it now, but I always like to put myself back in the shoes of when I heard it for the first time. And Bob always keeps an egg timer, an hourglass, because as a reminder. So everything that's happening, which is past, is here. The past is the past. One of the things that when I was seeing therapists and all sorts of people to try and figure out what was going on inside me, they always wanted to drag up everything from the past. Bob always said to me, it's gone. We're not going in that direction. The past is the past. And then up here is the future. And the interesting thing he told me was, we actually can have a vision sometimes of the future, but it's what we call our predicted future. And that is many times, for most people, is based on their programming. So, and perhaps even their limited beliefs. And they're saying, well, this is as far as I'm ever going to get. This is where I think I'm going to be, blah, 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 blah. No one knows what the future can hold, because this is going to be changing all the time, dependent on the now, right here, this bit here. And this is where we live, in this space, the now. And when you're living in the now and you're doing things that you want to be in your life, the way you want to be, in line with your goal, and goals I'll talk about in a few seconds, then you can be whatever you want to be. That sounds too good to be true, but it's still true. And the other thing to remember is, when you're focusing on just your current results and you think, well, I've imagined something, I've got a goal, and this is something that I want, but it just seems to be taking forever. Just remember, everything has an incubation period, particularly babies. If someone's having a baby, then as far as they're concerned, let's start getting the, once everything's checked off and it is definitely coming, then it's like, okay, getting the clothes, getting the prams and the wheelie things and all the gear, and a safe seat for the car, and they start getting all the clothes, because as far as they're concerned, the baby's on the way. It's just a matter of arriving. It hasn't arrived to the physical world yet, but it's on the way. If you think about something as simple as ordering something from Amazon, most things you can get next day delivery. And, I don't know about you, but as far as I'm concerned, right, well, it's here. It's already here. I mean, it's arriving tomorrow, but it's already here. It's done. And that's exactly how we should view it. You should view it when it comes to your goals. You act as if it's already on next day delivery. It's already here as far as you're concerned. So you act as the person who has achieved that goal now. So you are always behaving as that person now. We talked about inner faculties. I'm going to get into the inner faculties now. Just before I do that, we're going to mention goals. Now, goals. Bob talked to me about goals, and I have to admit, I've heard goals for years. Most people would talk about, you know, they've got to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely, and that's fine. Personally, it never really worked for me. Bob started to talk about it in a different way. He started to talk about A, B, and C goals. And he said to me that an A goal is something you've done before. It's like getting a car and you just want to get another one exactly the same. And B goals are something you haven't done before, but you're fairly comfortable with the fact that at a bit of stretch from what you have done in the past, you're pretty sure you can now do this. So that's a B goal. Now, a C goal is something that comes from your imagination. And it's something that you really, really desire, you really want. And the most important thing is you have absolutely no idea how you're going to achieve it. So you may have had no intellectual experience in this in the past. It's completely coming from the spiritual place. It's completely coming from your imagination. This is something big that you really, really desire. And you've never done it before, and you have no idea how you're going to do it. I thought that was pretty nuts. And as I did with a lot of things Bob was telling me at first. And he talked about the space project when they were going to the moon. And he talked about Dr. von Braun, who I believe was one of the chief engineers for the space project. And he was talking to Kennedy, and Kennedy said, what do we have to do to get to the moon? And Dr. von Braun said, basically, we just got to decide we're going to do it. We just got to make that decision. And when we make that decision, we're going to get there. So there were things, as they're, you know, working on the program, there were things they had never done before, and they didn't know how they were going to do it. But they had decided, we're going to go. We're going to the moon, even though we don't know how we're going to do any of these things. We're going to do what we do know right now, and the other things we'll just figure out somehow on the way. But they had set a goal, and they've made a decision, and we're going to do it. Now, that may sound silly, just by making a decision that, you know, you've got no idea how you're going to do it, but somehow you're going to make a decision, and therefore you're just going to do it. But let's think about things for a minute. It's got to be something you truly love. Now, this isn't the bike that I had when I was a young lad, but it kind of looks very similar. And as I say, when I was a young man, I wanted a motorcycle. Now, with C-type goals, this is not something that, you know, like other people may say, well, you know, what do you need that for? You don't need that. Or this, a lot of these goals will be something that you want. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to justify it to anybody. If that's what you want and what you love in your life and brings you harmony, and you feel it fits with you, it fits with all the things you love to do and what you truly, truly want, whatever that goal is, it doesn't have to be something that other people perceive as logical. In fact, logic doesn't have an awful lot to do with it. Logic is one of those things that, you know, there were these wonderfully logical people who used to say the world was flat, which, you know, does seem pretty logical. And therefore, if you went too far, you'd fall off the edge of it. That seems pretty logical as well. And of course, it was a load of rubbish. So don't go with logic. Now, when I got this bike, I didn't know how I was going to get it, but I wanted it. I didn't know how I was going to get the money for it, but I got it. I didn't know how I was going to ride it. In fact, I'd had a smaller bike before I got this one. And the smaller bike didn't have that bit on the front, and they call it a fairing. Well, that's what they call it in the UK. And so the other bike I could ride. It was much smaller, but I could ride it. And because you didn't have a fairing, you could see the wheel on the front. And when I got this bike, I never even considered the fact that when I got on it and started riding it, all of a sudden I panicked, because as I looked to the front, I couldn't see the wheel. And I thought, I'm going to fall off. I'm going to fall off. But I didn't need to see the wheel. I wasn't thinking about any of these things about how will I do it? Can I do it? Will I do it? Will this work? When you've got a true desire, a true C-type goal, it's just something that you want. And you don't think about any of the things that, you know, any of the detail about how you're going to do it or anything. You just go for it. That is a true C-type goal. I love this picture. Here you see a wonderful young girl, and it's pretty clear what her goal was. That is what she wanted. That was her desire. And that was the picture she had in her mind. And there she is with her little toy Alsatian, and she's got her wonderful uniform on. And there she is today as a police officer with her real live Alsatian police dog. And if you have that picture in your mind, you can bring it into the physical world. We can all do this. Here's a picture that I'm very, very fond of. And I think a wonderful example of manifesting. And again, when we're children, we manifest all the time. We imagine all the time, but it's almost, you know, programmed out of us to stop imagining, to be logical, to follow the crowd, to, you know, do what fits the programming of the people who are caring for us, who, by the way, have been given their own programming. Most of these people they're not even aware that they've been given programming. And as we get older, we actually learn not to imagine, not to dream or fantasize about what we truly desire. So once we get that C-type goal, we make a decision, just like Dr. Von Braun and John F. Kennedy said, right, we just need to make the decision, we're going to go, and we will get there. It moves from a fantasy to a theory. You start thinking, well, you know, what if I could? What if I could? You just focus that picture more and more in your mind. Just like when I saw that bike, I had a picture of it on my wall. You know, the more I saw it, the more I started to think, maybe I could get this bike. Wow. If I was, you know, I'd think about riding it and whatever it, you know, you think about your home, or you think about what you want in your business, or perhaps something you want to do to help your children or friends or anything, or just, you know, something you really, really enjoy and you've always wanted to do. And you can bring that from theory to fact. There's two ways that we change the programming that we have been given as children. And this is programming that we identify that isn't serving us. And the way you identify if you have programming or habits, basically that's what programming is, habits, that is serving you or not, is by knowing your goal. If you know your goal, you know what direction you want to get into, and you know intuitively inside yourself, you know what habits serve you to get to that goal and what habits don't serve you. You know the sort of person you need to behave like, who's going to be the person who's achieved that goal. You can look in your mind's eye and say to yourself, right, when I've got to that goal and I've got this thing, I'm going to be this kind of person. Well, you need to be that kind of person now. You've got to fulfill the habits that that person will have now, so that you draw the goal towards you as well as you moving towards the goal. You've got to start acting like it. So you look at all your habits and you look at the ones that serve you, that are positive towards your goal, and you look at the ones you feel are not serving you, are not positive. And you start looking at the ones that aren't serving you, and you start taking them one at a time, and you flip them. You flip them from exactly what the habit is now to the complete opposite, to the one that's going to serve you towards your goal. And this fits what we talk about, the law of polarity. And of course, if you agree that everything is energy, then I'm not a scientist now, but as far as I'm concerned, everything that exists, it has positive and negative. Even if you break down all the little particles and bits and pieces, it's all positive and negative. So everything exists has a positive and negative pole. People used to say to me, again, these wonderful business people I used to work with, and they used to say, always look for the positive, always look for the positive. And I thought that was wonderful, but it just didn't seem very practical to me. I thought, you know, sometimes things are just like negative. You know, how can everything be positive? But when Bob explained this thing to me about energy, and that positive and negative have to exist for something, like the particles, anything to physically exist, both positive and negative have to be present. I finally got it. So therefore, if everything that exists has a positive and negative, if something you perceive as bad has happened, then for that to exist in the negative, there has to be a positive. So you can look for the positive pole because it has to be there if you've got the negative side of it. Does that make sense? So all the time, you can switch your habits, whatever they are, to the positive pole. You can literally flip them to the opposite. And when you're doing things that you have that are habits that aren't serving you to what you truly desire, and you know, like eating food is quite you know, can be an interesting one. And you have people who really want to lose weight, and yet they'll eat that chocolate cake, and they know what they need to do, they know what food they should be eating, but they still do it. So why do you do things? Why would we do habits that aren't going to serve us, that activities that aren't going to help us? And we know we shouldn't be doing it. We know exactly what we should do, but we don't do it. And that's because the programming we've been given has become so set in, just like a default program in a computer. We have to take the habit, and instead of trying to break it, which is what most people do, we're going to switch it for a new habit. And when you're doing things and you don't know why you're doing them, even though you don't want to do them, is what we call the knowing doing gap. And there's only two ways to break it. One is a shock, like, you know, the twin towers going down. And there are things that will have caused people to reevaluate their lives from that shock. And perhaps there are things that they've said, oh, I'm afraid to do this, or I'm not sure if I should do that, and they couldn't make a decision, and something like that would happen. And all of a sudden, someone will say, you know, there is more important things in the world. I don't need to be worrying about anything can happen tomorrow. You know, I'm going to do this because this is what I really want to do, and you only live once. So this shock will cause them to just take action, make the decision, and gain clarity. The other way is simply through repetition. So in the same way the programming was put in, over and over and over and over again, like we learnt language, all these other habits were the same way, just repeated over and over again. When we replace it and we flip it to the more positive habit, we simply start repeating that over and over, literally writing it down, saying it to ourselves, playing it to ourselves audibly, even saying it to ourselves in a mirror. And we just keep doing it over and over and over again, exactly the same way the old habit was put in the first place. We replace it. You take we now call paradigms, because habits are basically a paradigm. It's a bunch of thoughts, feelings, and actions that form into a habit, and this habit becomes permanent, just like the programming in the computer, and we just follow it all the time, a paradigm. But we can create them to new paradigms. So you take your old paradigms, the ones that aren't serving you, you list them all down, you flip them to the paradigms you do want, and then you take the piece of paper with the old one and you burn that sucker. Just burn it. It's a little bit like, you know, in the Matrix, when he says, you know, if you want to know the truth, do you want the red pill or the blue pill? If you take the pill, that will show that your acknowledgement that you want to know the truth. You're showing the acknowledgement to your mind that these habits are no longer okay with you, and you're now going to follow these new habits. And you start taking them one at a time. You don't try and do more than one or two habits at a time. And sometimes it means you just write them down. I am so happy and grateful now that, and then whatever it is the new habit. And then it's also good if you write with ease, flow, and joy. So all the time you're telling your mind that you're happy and grateful, that you're now taking this new activity and it's happening easily with flow and joy. This is not something that will have to be forced. You will do it with ease. And you may have to write it down 50, 100 times a day. And as you do this, your mind will be saying things like, this is crazy. I'm writing this stupid thing down on this piece of paper. This is never going to work. And that is your ego and your programming fighting it. And they will put up a fight. The old programming will try to stop you and try to discourage you from resetting the programming. But if you just keep at it, it will reset. So this is a picture that Bob showed for me, and it's called The Stick Person. And it talks all about what our minds look like, because we think in pictures. Yeah, everything we create, we put the picture in our mind. So, you know, if I was to say to you your front door or your car or whatever, your house, straight away a picture of that thing will come into your mind. But if I say to you, what is the picture of your, you know, what does your mind look like? Some people might think of like their brain. But if you think about it, you know, is your brain your mind? I mean, your brain really is like this amazingly sophisticated electrical switching station, which is sending instructions all the time to your body. But it's not your mind. It's a little bit, if you think about it for a minute, we talk about our body, but we are not our body. We, you know, our hands, they're our hands, but we're not hands. We're not our body. So if we're not our body and we're not our brain, what are we? Well, that's where it comes back to, we are spirits and the mind. So they came up with this picture because we, as I say, we used to look everything in pictures to help us to understand what the mind looks like. And here you have this huge head. Now, of course, the mind is, you know, throughout your entire body. But just for the sake of this picture, just so we can focus on what our mind looks like, this is the stick person. So you've got this large circular head, and at the top you've got the conscious mind. And the conscious mind is your thinking mind. It's when you're aware, you're self-aware, and you will find that so many of us are so little of the time self-aware or even thinking. But that's your conscious mind. And then if you almost imagine a line going through your head here, and then underneath you've got the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is purely subjective. So it will follow whatever instructions you give it. And how does it get those instructions? By talking to yourself. You know, I don't talk to myself. Well, we do, don't we? Because everything we say out loud in conversation, or whatever it is, we are talking to ourselves. If we tell ourselves we can't do something, if we tell ourselves something is difficult, or if we tell ourselves something is easy, or we tell ourselves we can do something, we're really good at this, the subconscious mind just simply notes it all down and does exactly what we say. And then finally, the mind is actually gives instructions to the body, and then the body takes the actions. Now, the interesting bridge between conscious and subconscious are feelings, emotion, energy, emotion. And how we feel about something is a massive condition on how we're going to act. So we can have all the knowledge, we can know exactly what we need to do, but if we're not feeling motivated, if we don't feel a desire, if we don't feel we truly love this thing that we want to do, if we don't feel right about it, we're not going to do it. It's not going to happen, no matter how much knowledge we have. So the bridge is our feelings. So the conscious mind is what comes up and imagines, has the ideas, imagines what is possible. The feelings transfer to our subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind sends instructions then to the body, and then the body starts taking the action. And with new action, we get new results. Does that make sense? So, new results. So, understanding the mind. Bob also drew these like little TV antenna. Hear, see, smell, taste, touch. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. And, this is pretty important senses. But Bob explained to me that these senses are basically like superhighways that are from the outside world, because it's all information coming in. And it's like all this information is clogging our minds, like a really jammed up road traffic system. And the thing that we need to do is not judge what we can or cannot do, but the information we're getting from the outside, which in many cases is inaccurate, or it might be coming from the news, or it might be coming from, oh, there's a big downturn. Oh, well, if there's a big downturn, the news says there's a big downturn, they must be true. Not necessarily. Or information that's coming from other people and their opinions. And these other people are coming to you with information based on their programming. And if they haven't started to become aware, and they haven't started to learn about their own faculties and how they can actually manifest anything they want, they're going to be giving you information just based on that programming, which again is going to lead to limiting beliefs. So you don't want to be focusing on those things. What we want to be focusing on is the inner faculties. And one of those inner faculties is perception. And perception is very, very important. It's being able to understand that you can have an entirely different point of view from someone else. And their point of view isn't wrong, and your point of view isn't wrong. It's just a different point of view, a different place that they're looking at that same subject. So in this case, you see the apple's been bitten on one side, and in the mirror, it looks perfect, like a great apple, but it hasn't been bitten at all. Bob did the thing where he held up a book and he said, right, can you see print on the front of this book? And of course we could. So there's print. And he'd say, no, there's not. Look, Bob, I think you need to check your glasses, because there is definitely print on the front of this book. And then he turned the book round and the other side of the book was blank. And we said, well, yeah, that side's blank. Well, from his point of view, the book was blank. From our point of view, the book had writing. From this point of view, the apple has been bitten. From the mirror's point of view, the apple's perfectly fine. So whenever you're getting thoughts and information, it's all remembering that people will give you information, you'll get information from the outside, but it's understanding that that information is not necessarily correct. It's not necessarily, you know, wrong either, but it's coming from that point of view. You need to look at things from your point of view. Perception is very important. Intuition. Intuition is a marvelous faculty. And this is something that will be talking to us all the time. And you will feel things sometimes, you know, perhaps there's something that you've always dreamed of doing, or, you know, these thoughts come into your mind, and perhaps something pops up in your life that turns out to be a possible opportunity to take that desire that you've always pushed back in the back of your mind and out the way, that you could take it forward, and something pops up, and intuitively, you know, there's a chance here that you might be able to take something and run with it. But do you listen to your intuition, or do you just put that in the back cupboard of your mind as well and just ignore it? Because fear is a big part of the programming, and fear, ego can all cause a lot of procrastination and limiting beliefs. So you don't follow that intuitive instinct and take the action. But if you learn to listen to your intuition, it can be immensely powerful for you. Imagination. Well, of course, imagination is where all manifestation comes from. Imagination is hugely important, and something, as I say, we need to regain many times from our childhood, because we all know how to do it when we're children. The will is very important. To have the will to be able to consistently do something and understand that this is something that's on its way, and that you're not going to look at your present results, but you're going to have the will to give yourself an instruction, give yourself a command, and be able to follow it. How many people are able to do that? Or is it all these doubts that get in the way? And even though they want to do something, the doubts win. So the will is giving you, be able to give yourself a command and follow it. Memories are very important. We all have a perfect memory, and it's remembering the things that we love to do, remembering the things that we enjoy, remembering the things we are good at, using our memories in a positive way. And again, reason is incredibly important. Following, or if you imagine, this is all part of our inner self, our inner faculties, to be able to reason things through and reason how we can move forward with a life that we truly desire, and not be thrown off again by thoughts and comments that are coming from all sorts of other people and other opinions. So that is a kind of like a brief run through, skipping along a lot of very, very important subjects that I've just touched upon. And there's an awful lot of things that we can still talk about. And on all the subjects that I've done my best to cover today, as I say, we could go into them all individually in a lot more detail and really take some time on it. So if you'd like to know more about these things, you know, let me know within the community, or drop me a message, and I'd be happy to share with you. Ego in your comfort zone is another important one. Fear is a biggie. In fact, fear is something that you can teach yourself to have a habit of expecting fear and regarding that as a positive thing, saying, great, I'm feeling a little bit scared, this is definitely the direction I need to go in. A little bit like your intuition. Self-image. There's a wonderful guy called Cary Grant, who lived in the back streets of Bristol and eventually became a Hollywood star. Many of you may not have heard his name because, you know, he's quite a few years ago, but he literally became Cary Grant. He focused on the picture of the person that he wanted to be, and he became that person, and he became a person that he was happy with the person that he took all these characteristics from different people and put them together and made the person he wished to be. Belief and praxis, awareness, cause and effect, gratitude. Meditation is a biggie. Meditation can activate your subconscious mind, your infinite mind, and give you answers to things. So when you ask yourself a question, then you go away and maybe sleep on it, or, you know, and then all of a sudden the answer comes out of nowhere. That's your infinite intelligence working while you've been sleeping or meditating. So using meditation is a really important thing to learn. There's so many things that we can talk about when it comes to mindset, and I am learning myself all the time. But I hope you found some of this interesting, and I really, again, appreciate Susan Rishheimer, who asked me to come on, and Annie Davis from Hawaii, and it was a true pleasure. And I hope I get an opportunity to just talk about some other things in some more detail in the future. All right, all the best now. Goodbye from the UK. Bye.